What if I told you that everything you believed about your family was built on a lie? What if the man you trusted most in the world had been deceiving you for over 20 years? What if the child you raised as your own was never really yours at all? This is the story of Sarah Martinez, a woman whose entire world crumbled in just 7 words whispered by a stranger. Sarah had always been protective of her son Michael. 22 years old, with bright green eyes and a smile that could light up any room, she had raised him alone after his father David supposedly died in a car accident when Michael was just 2 years old. Or so she thought. It was a Tuesday afternoon in downtown Phoenix. Sarah was picking up groceries when she saw him. A tall man with graying hair standing by the parking meters. His eyes locked onto hers, and something about his stare sent chills down her spine. She had never seen this man before yet. Something felt disturbingly familiar. Michael was with her that day, helping carry the shopping bags. As they walked toward their car, the strange man began following them. Sarah quickened her pace, her heart racing. She could hear his footsteps getting closer. "Stay away from my son," she yelled, turning around to face the stranger. Her voice echoed across the parking lot, drawing stares from other shoppers. She was ready to call the police, ready to do whatever it took to protect Michael. But then the man stopped. He looked directly at Michael, studying his face with an intensity that made Sarah uncomfortable. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then the man leaned closer and whispered 7 words that would change everything. "I am his real father, Sarah." The grocery bags slipped from Sarah's hands, apples and oranges scattered across the asphalt. Her legs felt weak. Her mind raced, trying to process what she had just heard. This couldn't be true. David was Michael's father, David who died 20 years ago. David who she mourned for years. The man standing before her looked nothing like the David she remembered. Yet as she stared at his face, she began to notice small details. The shape of his nose. The way he stood. The green eyes that matched Michael's perfectly. "My name is David Rodriguez," the man continued. "I know this is impossible to believe. But I need you to listen to me. I am not dead, Sarah. I never died in that car accident." Michael stood frozen between them, his face pale with confusion. "Mom, what's going on? Who is this man? Why is he saying these things?" Sarah felt like she was living in a nightmare. How could David be alive? How could he have let her believe he was dead for 20 years? How could he have let her raise their son alone, thinking she was a widow? David began to explain, and his story was more shocking than Sarah could have ever imagined. 22 years ago, he had been involved with some very dangerous people. People who were looking for him. People who would have hurt Sarah and baby Michael if they had found them. The car accident had been staged. David explained he had to disappear to protect his family. He had been living under a different identity, in a different state, watching from afar as Sarah raised their son. He had wanted to come back so many times, but it was never safe. Sarah listened in disbelief. Tears streamed down her face as 20 years of grief and loneliness suddenly felt meaningless. She had mourned a man who was alive. She had struggled as a single mother while her child's father was out there somewhere living his own life. But why now, she asked through her tears. Why are you here now after all these years? David looked around nervously. The people who were after me, they found me again. Sarah, they know about you. They know about Michael. We are all in danger now. I had to warn you. I had to see my son before something happens to any of us. Michael finally spoke up, his voice shaking. This is insane. Mom, tell me this isn't real. Tell me my father is dead like you always said. Tell me this man is crazy and we should call the police. Sarah looked at her son, the boy she had raised alone for 20 years. She saw David's eyes looking back at her. She saw the same stubborn chin, the same way of running his hands through his hair when he was nervous. All the pieces were falling into place. David reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were photographs, documents, birth certificates, hospital records, pictures of Sarah pregnant. Pictures of baby Michael that she had never seen before. Pictures that only a father would have kept. I never stopped loving you, David said, his voice breaking. I never stopped watching over both of you. From a distance, but I was always there. When Michael graduated high school, I was in the crowd. When he got his first job, I was parked across the street. I have missed 20 years of his life, but I never stopped being his father. The three of them stood in that parking lot as strangers walked by, completely unaware that a family was being torn apart and put back together at the same time. Sarah felt anger and relief, confusion and love, all mixing together in her chest. Michael began to cry. Something deep inside him seemed to recognize this man. Some buried memory or genetic connection that he couldn't explain. "Dad," he whispered, and the word felt both foreign and familiar on his tongue. But their reunion was short-lived. David kept looking over his shoulder, his nervousness growing by the minute. "We can't stay here," he said. "We need to go somewhere safe. I need to tell you everything about why I had to leave and why we might have to leave again." They drove to Sarah's house in silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Sarah kept glancing in the rearview mirror at David, wondering how her life had changed so dramatically in just one afternoon. At home, David told them the full story. 22 years ago, he had witnessed a crime, a murder committed by some very powerful people. They knew he had seen them. They were hunting him. When Sarah became pregnant, David realized that staying would put both her and the baby in mortal danger. So he faked his death with the help of someone in law enforcement. He created a new identity and moved to Oregon. He got a job as a mechanic. He lived quietly, never married, never had other children. He spent every day thinking about the family he had left behind. He showed them more photographs, pictures of himself over the years. Pictures of a small apartment with photos of Sarah and Michael covering every wall. He had aged alone, missing birthdays and holidays and every important moment in their lives. The dangerous people had eventually been caught and imprisoned. But recently, some of them had been released. Others had never been found. David had been living peacefully until last month when strange things started happening. His apartment was broken into. His car was vandalized. Someone was watching him again. That was when he realized they had found him. And if they had found him, they would soon find Sarah and Michael. He had driven straight from Oregon to Phoenix to warn them, to finally tell the truth. To see his son face to face, even if it was dangerous. As night fell, the three of them sat around Sarah's kitchen table. David told Michael stories about when he was a baby. Stories that only a father would know. Michael listened with tears in his eyes, 20 years of questions finally being answered. But their emotional reunion was interrupted by a sound outside. A car door slamming. Footsteps on the porch. David jumped up, his face filled with panic. "They found us," he said. "We need to leave now." Through the window they could see two men in dark suits approaching the front door. David grabbed Sarah and Michael. "Get to the back door," he whispered. "Stay low, move quickly." They slipped out through the backyard and climbed into David's car just as the front door exploded inward. As they drove away, Sarah could see the men searching her house with flashlights. Her quiet suburban life was officially over. "Where are we going?" Michael asked from the back seat. David looked at his son in the rearview mirror. "Somewhere safe," he said. "But we might have to keep running for a while. The people after us, they don't give up easily." Sarah reached over and took David's hand. For 20 years, she had been alone. For 20 years, she had believed the love of her life was dead. But now, sitting in this car with her husband and son, she felt something she hadn't felt in decades. She felt like she had a family again. Even if they had to spend the rest of their lives running from shadows. Even if they could never go home again, they were together. And sometimes being together is worth any price. As they drove through the night toward an uncertain future, David told them about the new identities he had prepared. The safe house in Montana. The friends who would help them disappear. He had been planning for this day for 20 years. The day when he would have to choose between his safety and his family. He chose his family. Michael fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the emotional upheaval of the day. Sarah watched him in the side mirror. This morning, he had been her son. Now he was their son. She had her husband back, and her son had his father. But at what cost? David seemed to read her thoughts. "I know this is not what you wanted, Sarah. I know you built a good life without me. I know this changes everything, but I couldn't let anything happen to you or Michael. I would rather die than lose you again." Sarah squeezed his hand tighter. "We will figure this out," she said. "We are a family now. Whatever happens, we face it together." The highway stretched ahead of them, dark and endless. Behind them, their old lives were disappearing. In front of them, an uncertain future waited. But for the first time in 20 years, Sarah felt complete. She had her son. She had her husband. She had her family back together, even if the world around them was falling apart. David glanced at her and smiled the same smile she had fallen in love with 23 years ago. "Some things are worth fighting for," he said. "Some things are worth any sacrifice." And as they drove into the night, Sarah realized that sometimes the most precious things in life are the ones you thought you had lost forever. Sometimes the dead come back to life. Sometimes families are reunited against impossible odds. Sometimes love really does conquer all. Even when that love comes with a price. Even when that love means running from the past. Even when that love means facing an uncertain future together. Because in the end, having the people you love by your side is worth more than safety. Worth more than comfort. Worth more than the quiet, predictable life you thought you wanted. It is worth everything. This is the story of Sarah Martinez. The woman who discovered that her dead husband was alive. That her son had a father. That their family could be whole again. Even if it meant leaving everything else behind. And sometimes that is exactly the trade worth making. If this story moved you even a fraction, as much as it changed Sarah's life. If it reminded you that love can survive anything, even 20 years of silence, then don't let it end here. Subscribe for more stories that remind us how strong family truly is. Like the video if you believe love can still find its way back, and share it with someone who might need to remember that even in a world full of lies, truth, family, and love still matter. Because sometimes the right story finds us exactly when we need it most.